If you like the video, help me out, subscribe, like, comment, anything helps me out. Thanks, man. Okay, so what I have right now, this is the score from when I benchmarked without shadow play running. So I put it up to show it. This right here is the run with shadow play recording, and you can notice the difference that you lose with using shadow play in FPS. But I figured I'd put the run up. This run would still be a record, I think it was, and then I did it without shadow play to get the actual record, but you won't be able to see that because if I record it, it takes too much of a hit in FPS. But you can look at the scores. You take a look at the score, beginning card, you look at the end card, you can see kind of how much points it affects it by. It affects it by a couple hundred points easy. So I think most of the time what I was told is that usually shadow play is maybe considered about a 5% hit or a little bit less. But all I know is this 4070 Ti Asus tough card I got is it's pretty good. It's got some issues with some noises coming out of it. I did beat it up pretty good last night. Yeah, I had the fans up to 100% usually when I'll do an overclock on something. And I thought the card originally when I first put it in, it had a little buzzy noise. I thought it might be close to coil line, but I found out that once I ran the fans at 100% for probably about an hour, I don't know. And then when I went to turn them down, I could actually hear the buzz as they're coming down. The same sound that I was hearing before that I thought was coil line. Yeah, the tough card's a good card. I mean, if you had to get a 3070 Ti, I mean, for what's out there about $800 to $850 range, this is probably a pretty good card. I mean, buying the Strix Asus 3070 Ti OC or even that's a few $100 more, $150 or $200 more. It's like, oh, that's really tough for a card of this performance. They look nicer, but still, I think if you were to go with the performance overall, this would be the card. I think the biggest push with this card in Nvidia has been that it's all about their DLSS 3.0 is what it is. But I mean, for me, I'm not into running DLSS, not at all. I'm more about rasterization performance. That's why you see overclocking of cards, and most of my channel, the cards are overclocked, but they're minimal. I mean, it would be the difference between probably fan speed on one card to another to the factory overclock that Gigabyte might have done over Asus or so, you know what I mean? Or versus a founder card, it's not that much, like maybe 100 extra on the core. So it's a little bump, but all I'm trying to do is average it out because maybe mine not a lot of GPU and yours is, or mine's not as good as yours, or mine's a little bit better. I've always figured try to get the maximum safe amount out of it. That's why it's max benchmarks. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I would consider it a good benchmark, and a little bump on it's no big deal. The memory on this card clocks really friggin' good. It's amazing how far it clocks. But when I'm benchmarking regularly with it, I probably will have nothing on it to maybe an extra 300 megahertz. But I usually don't mess with the memory. But the memory is usually good if it's rock solid. The memory is a good way to grab some good FPS on your card. It benchmarked an extra 1200. What does it get? I don't know. I'm trying to think about what it benchmarked overall. It was, I put on it, I'd have to look at MSI Afterburner. So I think it's like 10.5, and I got up to 12 on it. Yeah, so it's a couple thousand megahertz. That's pretty good. I've had actually cards in the 30 series that you couldn't overclock the memory at all. Most part though, I would say when it comes to overclocking memory, like your DDR5 or 4 or on a card, I usually don't mess with that because it's a temporary buffer and you really don't want any errors coming out of it. And it's already going to be overclocked differently by the manufacturers anyways to what they deem safe for all the memory made. So the next benchmark coming up is going to be Port Royal. Port Royal, because it's different core, right? It's for ray tracing. Gave me a lot harder times because it would not clock as high as a GPU would. So you can notice the clocks are a little bit lower when I had to tune it into what I could get to work. I mean, max overclock, usually I'll do that just to configure out to see what the card can do and then if I want to put anything extra on a little bit to balance it out. Usually I will. Plus, you'll notice I always have the fan speed on my benchmarks. You can see I'm what, 3,200 RPMs. That will go all the way up to 35 on this card, which was crazy to see that. Usually it's a little under 3,000 RPMs on a lot of cards. 35 was like really bumped it. The it's not a major thing. I mean, for me, I do a fan curve. If you see my benchmark, how to benchmark videos, which is in my help section on my channel, you'll see that the curve is just a little more aggressive for where it's quieter when it's idling, and mid-range is pretty good, but when the card starts to push, it kicks in a lot sooner, so that way I maintain a higher clock rate and a better FPS. Because to tell you the truth, when I'm doing the benchmarks, or if I'm gaming and I have the headset on, it's not going to matter. And a lot of times on some of these cards, the vendor actually tries to make them as quiet as possible. It's so weird that they'll end up with like cards with something, coil line on them. It's like, dude, you want a card quiet? You put in caps where you're getting too much coil line. It's ridiculous, but they really cut down the fans to where you can bump the fans on a good curve. It's still not really be that noticeable, to tell you the truth. So yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's for me, it's about getting the most out of the hardware safely. And a lot of the cards, they have built-in features. 20 years ago when I did this, cards did not have built-in features. You could lose your card, especially with the memory. The memory, things would just get screwed if you move the slider at all. But you know, with the built-in protections they have and everything like that, and having things like MSI Afterburner that'll just send the card back to 2D operation and profiles instead of 3D for the benchmark. You know, it's not like you have to shut down, reboot several times to get it back. The Port Royal benchmark, actually, to tell you the truth, I was surprised I was able to even beat any of these. I mean, it first started with just me running Speedway for the heck of it, because I haven't run it a lot. And I ran it slight, you know, the card not overclocked as high as probably the 3DMark one, but fairly close. I mean, you gotta realize these clocks, a few megahertz, it's not a lot of big difference. I think the biggest difference you'll see in a lot of this is you're gonna see you'll have better performance with your lows, which is important, and a smoother frame rate overall is one of the things like that, maintaining higher clocks. And I would say that was probably one of the best reasons to overclock it, not to mention that, like I said, the manufacturers, or Asus, Gigabyte, and like that, they take chips and they figure out what's the worst case scenario, right? All the chips run at, and then that's what they put their cards at. So, I mean, you can have a chip that in rally can run way better than the other chips, but if they didn't bend them and put them out of their cards, and they just put them in the cards, which some of the vendors do, you could have a chip that could just be screaming an extra 5, 10, 15 FPS easily without even affecting it. Where, you know, I've gotten bad chips, and it's ridiculous. I've had actually a Kingpin 1080 Ti that the chip was worse than a For the Win 3 card, 1080. I think it was 1080 Ti's, and it was just so depressing since the price difference for the Kingpin, but it looked really cool. You know, the gold fins and everything like that. But this is the first time I believe I've ever gotten legendary status. I'm gonna say this is probably because not a lot of people have these cards. Somebody probably will put a water on this loop. I mean, I wouldn't waste it with this card, but you know, I don't know. Maybe the cards are expensive. It's still a good card. Put a loop on it; it'll help. Anyhow, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.